Well, there's no problem. If you had a gun, shoot him in the head.
Welcome back to Shoot Me Straight with Eddie Gallagher and Dave Fields. Today we have an awesome guest, Alex Bonamarte, or Bonamarte,
also good,
if you want to get fancy with it. He is the owner of Firecracker Farms. If you have, I'm sure some of you have seen that I've been promoting that hot salt that he makes, which is extremely addictive, and I pretty much put it on everything. It's awesome, and I think it's the word is getting out of just how awesome it is. But I met Alex in Stuart, Florida at Operation 300 event. He was there taking part in that, supporting that nonprofit, and we got to chatting it up there, became buddies, and now we're sort of working together with the Firecracker Farms and trying to help that grow and get the word out just how awesome it is. But I really appreciate you coming down here, Alex, and this is your first time on the 30A?
That's right. It's first time on the Gulf Coast at all.
Nice. Yeah. What do you think so far?
It's really cool. It feels beachy. I mean, obviously that's the main draw. It's different from the part of Florida we live in.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at how different. It's hillier. It's cool. It's really pretty. We haven't been to the beach yet. So whole family came along, and we're going to investigate the beach scene.
When you say whole family, I mean 5 kids, right?
Yeah. I have 6 children, 5 with my wife, and all 5 are with us.
Wow.
Yeah, we figured do the drive, check it out, see what's up.
Heck yeah.
You homeschool too, don't you?
That's right. Well, my wife does the 99.9%. I do like the vocational, sort of like introduce to other entrepreneur buddies and learn about this and that and more hands-on stuff and some computer stuff too.
Oh, we'll have to delve into that for sure.
What ages are your kids?
So Nico's our youngest, and he just turned 3, and Max is the oldest, and he'll be 12.
Wow.
Wait, did I just say 12?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not true. It's 10.
10.
I just forget because he carries himself like a 12-year-old. So
dang. Yeah. Y'all packed him. I have 4, and we had 2, 4, 6, 8.
Okay.
But man, packing them in
that's my wife. Jackie is super powerful. That's all I can say. I mean, she makes it look easy, and that's, we discussed children very, very early, like probably the first time we met.
Really?
Yeah. Not like, hey, will you have a bunch of kids with me? But it was
will you reproduce with me?
I mean, I would have said yes, but it was, it was definitely not a surprise.
Yeah.
I just thought she was bluffing.
When she said, hey,
I want 5 kids.
Oh.
Boom, just like out of the gate.
That was the number?
5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well done.
And, it's cool.
What's the difference between 4 and 5? Big difference?
No. Well, 5 is tougher. Not for the parents. I think it's about 3 is when it, Yeah. Was 3 is, I feel like the number when all of a sudden you're like, okay, more children than arms.
Yeah. I feel like the
you
difference between having 4 kids and 5 kids is the difference between having 2 kids and 3 kids. Like you have that one out, so you have 3 of them now.
Yeah.
And then, if you had 4, they paired up together at least.
They do that. They're like a little club, and they do pair off. Max and Enzo are pretty close. I mean, going to be 11, going to be 9, and, they're just right at that stage. They share a room. They want to share a room. So they're just inseparable. Whenever they do anything with anybody, it's like they're a unit. And they're very different, but they're very similar.
Yeah.
People confuse them for twins all the time. So there's that. And then Allie, our daughter's in the middle, and then there's Rafa and Nico. So Allie is very much a princess, but she's also like a little commando princess because she's Kylie's brother. So she's
nice.
She can hang.
Yeah.
4 boys, 1 girl.
That's right.
Yeah. She's gonna be a protected girl for sure.
Yeah. Somebody once asked her, "Oh, do you like being them?" And she's like, "I love it. They treat me wonderfully." I was like, "Okay, cool." But meanwhile, they fight all the time. So I don't know, but in a good way. They're always testing the limits.
Yeah. But you told me this morning, we talked, and they might fight amongst each other, but they're very protective of each other from any other outside influences.
Yes.
So that's the way you want it.
It's neat.
Yeah.
I mean, they really look out for each other, you know.
So your grandparents, from what I read, was your grandparents came over from Italy?
Yeah, so
18.
on my dad's side, we have my dad's mom's family. They were from Sicily. My dad's side, Naples. So I don't know if this is relevant, but my dad's father was the youngest of 26.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
26
Yeah.
siblings?
Yes. He was essentially raised by his older siblings. And, his mother died in childbirth, and he left home pretty young. And, met my grandma and then went off to war and came back. And they settled in Brooklyn, where my grandmother had been raised, the Sicilian side. And they all lived together, my grandmother, her sister, my Aunt Jean, and my grandfather and my great uncle, and that's how they were brought up in Brooklyn.
That has to
Whole
be
family.
close to like a world record.
Yeah.
I don't know where any of these people are. I don't know. I have no record of any cousins or anything. It just sort of, like, I know there are other Bonamartes or people who have, a Bonamarte in their family that I don't know. Just the numbers unless some strange event happened on the East Coast.
Wow.
I don't know. So that's the thing.
Start your own country.
I mean, if you think about it.
26 siblings?
Well, if you think, my father then has 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been married 4 times, right? So I don't know. I don't know how many other people got married and had kids, but presumably there are many people. I don't know. But so every time I see somebody who I think looks a little familiar, I feel like I wonder. I never ask, but
wow,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. Kind of cool. Fun fact.
They moved to Brooklyn. So your grandparents moved to Brooklyn?
Yeah. So my grandmother lived in pretty much the same house the whole time. It was one of the first houses on the street to have electricity, which is kind of tells you how old, And that was it. Her father died very young. I think he may have been involved in who knows what.
Can you just move up a little bit closer?
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
You're good.
And so he had a young death. And so it was essentially my grandmother and her mother and her sister and her brother, Freddie, and then their husbands. After Uncle Freddie moved out and got married after the war, and my grandfather and my great uncle and my grandmother and great aunt lived there. And that's where my grandmother had my father and my aunt, and then that's how he grew up. And I think you're bringing up my grandmother because she was a hot pepper person, and that was sort of like an unknown thing. I didn't know that until I later lived in that house in Brooklyn when I moved to New York, and it was a surprise because I asked her if she had hot sauce one day, and I reached into the fridge, and she said, "Oh, yeah, I have this stuff in there." And I poured it all over my eggs the way she does. And I took a bite, and my head almost blew up. It was like a Scotch bonnet, like super hot, like Jamaican thing that I couldn't believe. And I thought, this is no joke. She kind of snickered, like a little. She was super low-key about everything. Yeah, it was funny. My dad always liked it, and so.
Do you think genetics plays a part in being able to take really hot sauces?
No, I think it's familiarity, because if I eat really hot stuff now, and I hadn't for a while, I notice it. And certain peppers treat you differently, let's just say. Some stuff happens really quickly at the front of your mouth, or in your nose almost, or roof of your mouth, and other stuff just feels like you swallowed a coal, and it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It just stays. And then tomorrow you're like, why did I do that? So, they're not all equal, even though they could be equally hot at the very onset, but they just behave differently. I don't know the chemistry behind it. But,
wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not just capsaicin, I'm telling you. Like they measure, Scoville counts and stuff. Oh, 1 million SHU, but like if it's from a cayenne pepper, it didn't been concentrated, it's not going to do the same thing as like just a bite of a scorpion.
And your dad, did he have a fascination with or like a liking towards hot?
Yes, he's a pepper lover as well. So when I'm thinking, this is when he lived in Atlanta briefly. I remember finding him in the pantry. There's a little pantry, and he was in there in a bathrobe with a spoon and a bottle of sauce. I thought, what is this? He was kind of nuts. And I thought that was crazy. He was just eating it for the thrill of the heat. And he's sort of like a pretty straight-laced guy for the most part. He's a lawyer. And I don't know what he was doing in there. It was weird. But I remember it. And then, yeah, it must have been like 11 or something like that, or 10, 11. And then, later on, he started growing them. I think he was growing habaneros first. And that was pretty hot. I remember a time, think back like 20 years ago, habanero was, if you were not of an ethnicity that ate hot pepper all the time, that would have been like off the charts hot. Now it's kind of like everywhere.
Yeah.
But it was, they can get pretty hot, compared to like a Tabasco. Some people think Tabasco's hot, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, it's different strokes for different folks, man. Yeah.
But if you eat one thing and you build up, eventually you develop a tolerance. I mean, it acts on the dopamine system.
Oh, for sure.
And so what happens is your body says, oh, something's happening, do this thing, recover from this. So you get that feeling of, some people feel euphoric when they eat hot pepper. Other people just notice the heat. But there's definitely something that happens that relaxes you. It does a variety of different physiological things. And then, eventually your body says, oh, I know what that's not, you don't need that response. And so you need more. Your body says, oh, false alarm. This isn't really dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed. So, I mean, I use the hot salt on everything.
Right.
And I mean, to me, it's not hot to me anymore. Like,
right.
It's just regular salt.
And was it hot the first time?
And I like hot stuff. I put Tabasco or hot sauce on a lot of stuff. And I grew up, obviously in Asia.
Right.
Most of my childhood. My dad really liked spicy Asian food. I mean, we'd go to restaurants and he'd be like, hey, I want, the ultimate spice. And they'd be like, oh, 1 through 10. He's like 12,
Yes.
And so I grew up eating hot stuff all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, when I tasted it, I mean, there's definitely that kick. I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. But I've noticed, like, I've watched some other people taste it and they're like, oh shit, like that is hot. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I guess, but then when I use the liquid little drops,
That's different.
that right there
that's another thing entirely.
that'll turn up the volume. So yeah, I like that though, that you have the ability to add more heat to it if you need to, or you just want to chill.
I've been considering changing, offering different strengths, but I don't know. I mean, at this stage, it's so early. We're just brand new and figuring it out. So I think for the most part, the current strength is appropriate for just about everybody. And if somebody really wants it to be hotter, they say, hey, can you make me a hotter one? And my answer is, of course. How hot do you want it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you grow them on a farm
Yeah.
at your house.
Yeah. So we have a property in Martin County, which is north of Palm Beach County.
Okay.
So where West Palm is. It's just 30 minutes about north of that.
Okay.
And we live in Palm City, which is, I don't know where it gets the city. I mean, it's not a city. I don't say that in a disparaging way, but like after having lived in New York, that to me, I think of like tall buildings and congestion. Yeah. So Palm City's not that. It's spread out. Everybody's got space. And the area where we live, it's called Palm City Farms, but there aren't that many it's not like a big agricultural production area, but they're sort of larger parcels of land. Some people have cattle. Some people have nurseries where they grow a variety of different things, but it's not like in the Midwest where you have got like tracts of land and massive equipment farming. It's nothing like that. I think there may be some orange groves nearby, but not right where we are. So we have a little area that we've sort of designated. It's a shade structure because these things grow better without getting too hot. So I learned, did a little research.
And you started this just because you loved doing it? You didn't?
So my background is more commercial production, web development, and things like that. And I had done e-commerce for people and been amazed at how different it could be for different clients. So some clients would have these great big plans and really cool product, but zero reach. And then they would struggle and they would get off the ground eventually, but it was like a slog, big grind for them.
Yeah.
Others would have like a mediocre product and a poor plan, but tremendous reach, and they would be off the charts successful. Mm-hmm. I thought, wow, that's a real eye-opener for me. So I thought after a really successful promotion of a product for a client, I don't want to name him because I eventually sort of fired him as a client, but he had a product, and a TV personality promoted this product on a daytime morning show, and they made millions of dollars in like literally every hour that it went from East Coast to West Coast. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is possible? I thought, okay, one day I'll have a widget and I'll get it on the Today Show or whatever,
Yeah.
Big dreams. But then, I just shelved that idea. But I had always wanted to have, make a brand, make a thing, and make a product. I didn't want to just sell, a thing, some random product. I wanted to make something and have a relationship with it and the people who use it. And, more bespoke, kind of like I like the idea of making something for a person. Like,
Well, it's something that you believe in.
Yeah.
Where instead of just making something like, I hope this sells, it's
Yeah.
something that you invested your time in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to learn how to do it, we touched on, I don't know if we were recording when we touched on homeschool, but, I've always worked for myself, since, I've been very entrepreneurial from a very, very, very young age. And, it's gotten more and more useful to other people over the years. Early stuff was all about me, and then now later stuff's sort of broader. And I wanted my kids to be able to learn how to make a thing from an idea. So we really started it like with a napkin sketch at dinner. Like, what about this? I want to grow hot peppers. What do you guys think? We could make a hot pepper company. That was pretty vague. That's about as clear. And then we started thinking about names and branding. And so they were part of the whole exercise, So
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I'd had that experience with Jackie, my wife, with the studio. I had the idea and I had the experience in the production space, but she and I really went through the process of creating a brand, creating a product, creating a service, and then building it from cold calls and who are you guys to the place, and then, exiting that business. And it was, it's cool. And I wanted my kids to at least peripherally understand what that's like to not know what you're doing, figure it out, take your lumps, adjust, keep going, get up and do the thing that's like irritating sometimes, and enjoy it, because that's how it works. That's how you make it happen.
Yeah.
Like anything. I don't care if you're into fitness or martial arts or studying, whatever it is, you're going to take your lumps, in the sense of like you're going to have to face it at a time when you don't necessarily want to.
Well, yeah, pain is growth.
Exactly.
Right? And
really,
pain comes in all different forms. Obviously with working out, that's, physical pain, but
Right.
then starting a business, there's probably a lot of emotional,
sure.
spiritual, all sorts of different types of pain. And when you feel that and that happens and you get through it, that's growth. And that's
Yeah.
how you move forward.
I think I also wanted to expose them to the I didn't really have a practical education, right? So I had to figure it out, pretty much how to do things, how to get, how to find employment, how to be of service, all these things. And it's nice to see. I think I want to provide the kids, and I know Jackie does as well, with the ability to observe and participate in things that will develop skills for them, not just credentials.
Yeah. Not just a degree, not just a certificate, but to actually.
Yeah, like, no, firsthand, I saw how that happened, and, what that looked like, and the relationships that happened, too, because that's the main thing that's been most surprising about this, is it's very social, in the sense that, maybe because it has to do with food, but I've had a lot of fun connecting with people. Like, hey, you want to try this, or what do you think of that? It's been a blast, and way more than I thought it would be.
What's interesting with that is, so like I got my undergrad in MIS, Management Information Systems.
Yeah.
So basically business and computers.
Right.
Right. And then my graduate degree was in counseling.
Oh.
And then I started a software company, and you know which degree I used more? The counseling.
Sure.
Because it's people, right? And understanding people, I learned how to listen. And really listen to what's not being said as well.
Yes.
And if you want to have any business, you need some social skills are probably one of the top ones of it, especially with marketing and sales. And the best products are the ones that, I mean, they almost sell themselves, but those relationships that you have are the things that open the doors. And I don't think a lot of kids get that in school these days.
No, I mean, I don't really know, honestly, what the current state of school life is like. You know, I have an older daughter in New York, and, you know, my impression is that the kids are compartmentalizing everything. Everything's planned, everything's scheduled, and then they're in this system, and I'm not even going to speak to what they're learning about and the kinds of agendas that there are in the schools now, because I don't agree with them.
You don't think that men can be women?
I think it's degrading to women, first and foremost. I mean, it pisses me off. I mean, if you've understand motherhood as a proxy, like a man, I don't think can ever. I'm sorry, men who feel like you can be a mom, you can't. You can be loving, you can be compassionate, you can be caring, you can have all these, you know, sort of typical skills and characteristics, but you cannot biologically be a mother. And there's something innately ferocious and powerful about women for their ability to do that. I mean, that's God-given ability, and I mean, I don't know. I don't want to just upset anybody, but the reality is
that's the most transphobic answer I've ever heard.
I don't care what you do with your hey, whatever people decide to do with themselves that doesn't hurt other people is fine by me. You know, if you want to do things that harm you, I hope you don't, but that's your choice, right?
It's fine, dude. I think it's all complete bullshit. And I think it's all made up, and it's a land of make-believe. And I think that people think if you're a man that thinks he's a woman or a woman thinks he's a man, you're mentally ill and you need help, and that's about it.
I mean, societally, though, we got this big
Nobody
problem.
wants to say that.
Well, it is true. And I think the big issue, though, is that society, for some reason, wants to normalize this stuff. And I don't know why kids need to be learning about transgender stuff. Why do kids need to know this stuff? They don't. Let them be kids. Let them do what they need to do, and then eventually they'll be out in the world and they'll meet people, and maybe they'll encounter somebody who...
It's because the kids are easy to manipulate, and they know they can't manipulate adults into it, so they're going to attack our children. And that's where we need to stand up as Americans and stop tolerating this, because that whole idea, and just like you said, I don't care what you do as long as it's not hurting me. Well, now it is hurting me. Now it is hurting my family, and it has to stop. So,
I guess that's I mean, taking a stand in that way.
Yeah.
I mean, we voted with our feet in a sense. You know, we don't want to expose our kids to stuff that we think will harm them, you know? I mean, that's just the bottom line. But I don't, you know, the stuff they're facing these days between that and social media, and I mean, I don't know if you've followed the stuff that Sean Ryan puts out, but one of the recent episodes covered sort of the predatory activities that happen in virtually every online space. And that's terrifying. I mean, kids are pretty open, and apparently they're targeted nonstop. Mm-hmm. And I was not, I mean, I suspected there was some of that going on, but the prevalence is just beyond. So who knows? Kids that are attached to their phones 24/7 in the care of people who are not their parents all the time, being indoctrinated. That's, I mean, who knows? So
yeah,
we're trying to provide the opposite of that.
Good.
You know, just because I figure they'll be good people. They'll help other people as a result of that. You know.
Well, I think these days you have to, and I like what you're doing, like the homeschooling, because, and that takes a lot. I mean, we couldn't. There's no way I could do that. I mean, that's pretty amazing that you guys are homeschooling
really
all of your.
I have to give her credit because she's doing the.
Yeah.
She faces it every day. You know, when sometimes it's not easy for
sure. But that's what we have to do nowadays. I mean, I tell people the best you can do if you're sending your kids to public school, just like I do, is you instill your values and beliefs into them at home, and you make sure that they understand those values and beliefs.
Yeah.
And, you know, and let them know, like, hey, the outside world is going to try and challenge those values and beliefs and try and change them. And it's up to you to stick to them if you want to. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you can't force your kids, obviously, to do what you want. And I think we all learn that as our kids get older. Eventually, you got to let them fly, leave the nest. But I truly believe if you grow up instilling your values and beliefs and what you believe, they'll, even if they stray away, they'll come back.
That's what you hope,
Yeah,
I mean,
that is the hope.
right? I mean, that's the toolkit. I'm thinking about the stuff that I learned from my father, the stuff that I learned from my mother, the stuff that I learned from my stepdad, my ex-stepdad, and all the people who've been in my life, mentors, people I've, close friends. You take a lot from people you don't realize. And as you get older, you look back and like, why do I believe this? Or why do I have this outlook or this ability or this skill or whatever it is? Usually there's somebody there, there's a model.
Yeah.
Even if you pick a role model that you never met, and just sort of try to emulate what you think they might be like. I mean, that happens a lot. We have a big impact, so it's it's a big responsibility.
It is.
What I like also, I like you involving them in the entrepreneurship aspect of it.
It's fun.
Because honestly, like I think of, and we've talked about this on podcasts before, me and Eddie have talked about it just personally, of just, man, we want to be not just good dads, we want to be great fathers, right? Like that's one of, if the end of my life, if they were like, hey, he was a great father, a great husband, a great father, like, scratch everything else, but great husband, great father, like, hey, those, like, I've fulfilled my primary roles here.
Right.
And I think of part of that is, I want them to know God. I want them to know the Lord. Can I force that? Nah, not really. Can I demonstrate it? Can they see me in my daily life? Like,
Lead by example.
100%.
Yeah.
But then what else do I want? I want them to be prepared to live on their, like, support themselves, to have some idea of money management, to have skills, to be able to go out into the world and not be filthy rich, but just be able to be successful and to be happy.
Right.
So, like, a big part of that is, giving them stuff that they don't necessarily learn in school, hopefully, in those experiences. One of my oldest ones, I already see her in her. She's got that entrepreneurship. So, I mean, we started off early on just doing a lemonade stand.
Cool.
And just going, okay, here, and I'm like, I took it too far. I'm like, hey, I'm going to give you seed capital. And she's like, what? I'm like, then going, hey, I get 30% of every lemonade you sell. And she's like, no, this is my money.
Right.
But just seeing her get excited about it, understand.
Early stage investors are entitled to a little bit more usually.
I know, right? I'm like, hey. but I involving them in an actual business like that, man, there's no education like that.
It's funny because I take the conversation. I mean, so with so many people around all the time, it's almost impossible to have a conversation that isn't overheard, right? Mm-hmm. So Jackie and I are constantly discussing different things, and I'll say, okay, so I'm thinking about ordering some, X, Y, or Z, and then we think we'll be able to do with it, and then we put in all the logistics of these things that you don't really think about until you're in it. Mm-hmm. But those are the things that take you time. Mm-hmm. It's like it's fun to do a design. It's fun to come up with a recipe. It's fun to talk about it sometimes, but the actual nitty-gritty of like, okay, now we're committed, so what does that mean? That means I need more of it, or I need to make the thing actually happen, or who's going to put it together, mm-hmm. What are the rules?
It's the execution of it.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the regulations? Like all these different things. So these things come up in conversation, and whether or not they're really directly involved, they're hearing it. And every once in a while they'll chime in with a question. What do you mean? And then they realize they're listening.
Oh, yeah.
It's going in. And so, I don't know, hopefully it helps them have a certain awareness of different aspects of things. I mean, they glaze over with the tech stuff a lot, so I still very actively involved in development projects and stuff, mm-hmm. but it's pretty cryptic to people who aren't in tech to talk about, frameworks and this or that. Oh, it's sort of like, what does that even mean? And it doesn't mean anything. It's too abstract. So, but they do pick up on the relationship components very much. There are certain clients that I consider really friends and even sort of role models. Like I aspire to operate like them on some levels that I've learned from them, and it's a really healthy relationship with pretty much every client that we have, and so I speak about them fondly. So I think my kids have this sense of, oh, so-and-so, I don't want to name names, but it's like, they know about these people and they think about them, and every once in a while they ask questions. It's interesting because it's a certain kind of exposure that, I don't know. I don't think it's common, but maybe, I don't know, maybe other family businesses have that sort of thing going on. I suppose if you have a family business and your kids are around and in it, they're going to learn it. Mm-hmm. It's just ours is weird because it's sort of decentralized and it's a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But you have when you have the tech experience with it, of getting it out there, of operating an e-commerce website, of actually doing it for other clients and now doing it for yourself, which is, I'm sure you've experienced this, is different when you're doing it for yourself.
So
it's
much
harder.
Significantly harder.
It's wild. Like, I can take someone else, build them out whatever they need. That's so much easier than when you're trying to do it for yourself. You're like,
it's almost like a self-portrait in a way. I mean, I don't know if this is going to sound kind of weird, but so I'm an art school person, which is what I learned in art school is how to accept really vicious, mean criticism, how to stand up for the thing you've done and articulate why you did it in the face of extreme criticism, and then a few technical things about how to actually make stuff and how like messaging works and stuff like that. Wait, you said something that in my mind is tangential. Like, I got to remember where I was going with this because it was relevant.
Doing it for yourself.
Doing it for yourself. So the first time I had to do when you're in an art school, you do sort of art stuff, and self-portrait is one of these things. And when you're doing that, you look at yourself. It's like, is that really what I look like? Is this really? I mean, you don't want to look at stuff. There's certain aspects. It's very psychological. It has really nothing to do with actually making. Maybe some people it's just making a likeness of themselves. But for me, it was really weird. It was very psychological. And it was very introspective and uncomfortable and odd. And the next time that happened in my life was in markets. I was very interested in trading financial futures at one point. And when you're making very large bets and under duress as a result of the chemical fluctuation that happens, and you realize, oh my gosh, if this goes wrong, I've not made the right decision. I've taken too much risk. That feeling puts you very much in that sort of like, there you are looking at yourself, and what does that mean? Like, how have I made this bad decision, or how have I put myself at this level of risk, and can I get away with it? And it's very, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it was weird. I don't know why I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how come. I mean, like when you're doing something for yourself, right, versus doing it for others. Maybe it's something to do. You said psychologically.
Yeah, it's like it's introspective in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
You look in, you're like, who am I? What does it mean if I succeed? What does it mean if I fail? Mm-hmm. And then you could tell yourself all these stories about what it means. And I feel like any high risk, being an entrepreneur is risky. It's not like life or death risky, but it's ego life death for some people. Some people are really tied up in whether or not to succeed against some metric that they set. Mm-hmm. So you evaluate yourself by very different standards than everybody else, mm-hmm. right? I'm guessing what people tell you about you and versus what you think of yourself, maybe they may not be aligned.
Yes.
That's always surprised me. But I think as it relates to risk kind of strips away, it puts you in that spot where you're like, okay, what am I? Here I am. If this is it, what am I? And I've noticed that with physical risk as well, that happens too. You're like in the zone, and then, the lead up and the after, they're very similar to that. You're like, did
you run into that a lot when you're working on the branding side for y'all of going?
Nah, well, a little bit. I have an attachment to the way I want it to be, mm-hmm. and I'm kind of tied up in it in a way that, like that's not me. Like I'm working with a fellow who I really respect, and I know he's got a lot of really, really good ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of, there are a lot of best practices that I'm aware of that I kind of bristle against because they don't necessarily always feel like the style that I want. But that's not necessarily what's best for the effort. Mm-hmm. So is it a vanity thing, or is it, do I want the best result, like the biggest reach, the most conversions?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a fine line. Right. I think that the product is yours.
Yeah.
You've invested all the time into it, and you have a certain expectation of how you want it to look and how you want people to perceive it. Right. But at the same time, if you have some really smart individuals helping you out, and they're throwing ideas at you. And as long as those people are able to like throw ideas and you're like, no, that sucks, and they can just take that and be like, okay, and then come back with another one. But I do think, because I've had the same issues as well, where people are like, no, this is what it is, and this is what we want you to sell it as. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that, because that's not who I am.
Right.
And I think if you stick to that belief and stick to that, stick to who you are, and you'll be fine in the end. I truly believe if you end up selling yourself out or being like, oh, okay, I'll go that route just to make money, that is a very dangerous road to go down.
I agree.
100%.
I agree. And I feel like if that was the objective, there are way easier ways to do that.
Yeah.
Like if I just want to make a thing that sells a thing, and I could make a message that appeals to the broadest audience, and pick a thing that is likely to appeal to a very broad audience, and just do that well, because I can execute well.
Start your own OnlyFans. There you go.
Hey, kids. Oh, wait. No, you can't be in this meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is some level. Eddie's right in that, like when you're aligned, right? Like we've talked about it with just the podcast. Like, man, we would never sell something that isn't us.
Right.
Like authenticity. When you're authentic in whatever it is that whatever company or business or product that you're selling, like when it's authentic, then the passion comes out. There's an alignment there, I feel like. But sometimes, I was going to ask you this, sometimes you can be too good at too many things, right? Like, so sometimes it's easier for someone to come in, they're like, hey, I don't know any web development. I know the product, and they just get a web development team to come in. They get a branding team to come in, and, and they have other people that come in and do all those things. Instead, when you know how to do it, when you're good at it, it's like, oh, I'm not going to go get a web development. I know how to build it out. I'm not going to get a branding. I know how to build that. And then pretty soon you've spent, months and months working on stuff that you could have just outsourced because you're an expert at those different things. You've found yourself in that where it's like, oh, we could have moved it.
Very relatable. Like, for example, the development business, this applies also to the Firecracker Farm, but in the web and app development space, I could very much have scaled the business. Mm-hmm. There's demand for the stuff we do, and there are ways to do it. But I just am very reluctant to hand over a decision-making capacity to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And it's not because maybe I have trust issues with everybody. I don't know. But it's like I've been burned a couple times way early on, and I thought, I don't know, part of me just wants to be involved. Mm-hmm. The point isn't to just make money. Like if I just wanted to make money, I would go sit at a terminal and trade futures all day long. Mm-hmm. And but I think there's more to it. There's something about the challenge, something about the process of having.
It's your baby.
It's not even that I have that like, oh, I'm so proud of this thing. It's more of like the process of being involved and having a purpose. Like when I'm working, like my favorite clients are really hard. Mm-hmm. They have really high expectations, and it's like, and they'll chew you out if it's not just exactly right because they know what you're capable of. It's like that kind of client that's probably tough is the best, because then you say, okay, you're right. I could have thought of that. I could have, and then elevate. That's neat, and it's hard, but that gives you a sense of purpose. So I don't know.
With Firecracker Farms, like, is that different than being an agency that you're helping their companies,
Yes.
but now it's your company?
Well, yeah, it's for us. I mean, we're doing this, and we're doing it for a lot of different reasons. Like, one, to learn how to grow stuff. I mean, I don't know about you, but the having confirmation about how fragile society and supply chains are. I mean, I was kind of a tinfoil hat kind of guy who always figured we're only a disaster away from realizing how fragile society is. Mm-hmm. And then, COVID brought that to the forefront, and just to see what a mess it was. And we got away. I mean, I think our country, considering how things got locked down and screwed with, it's amazing things didn't get worse.
Are you a doomsday prepper?
I'm not a prepper per se. I just think it's not in the sense that, actually, I don't really know. how to qualify to the degree.
Do you have a bunker?
No bunker.
With supplies?
No bunker. I believe being.
But you're prepared.
Yes.
There's a difference.
Yes.
Being a prepper and being prepared.
I'm prepared and comfortable. I feel like I could sustain a viable life for an extended period of time without the majority of the things that are normal. Like if electricity went, we'd be all right. If food supply went, we'd be okay for a while. You know, we're not at the mercy of like, oh no, Publix is closed, we're going to starve to death. It's not going to happen. So, but we want to be able to grow our own food at a larger scale. So we don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I would starve. I would starve to death.
Yeah, no, I would. I'm like a food person, so I mean, I would probably eat a neighbor before. I'm just kidding. But it's, I'm not. I think it's important to be.
You're not a prepper. You're a pepper.
I'm a pepper. I'm a pepper prepper. It's no that that's one of the reasons why the hot salt. So I thought if ever the food supply gets weird and you can't just get all the things, you still have to eat and still it should be all right. Hot salt will work forever, and that was kind of a side thought.
Yeah,
Not a primary.
Makes everything taste good too.
It does,
no matter what you're eating.
That's the thing. So I don't know. We're on a big tangent. But yeah, I wanted to learn that. Jackie wanted to learn that. We have a couple other things other than peppers, you know, some pineapples and some avocados, and just trying to learn how to grow stuff reliably. And it's cool. I've learned a lot about how little I knew. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying I learned a lot, I mean, I've learned probably a fragment of what's available to know. I got a very small amount, and there's so much more. And, you know, something as simple as, you know, you put the plant into dirt, you add water and sun, and it gets bigger. Okay, right, but there's so many nuances. There's all these things, the pests that come in, and, you know, too much water, not enough water at the right time. All these things are really make a difference in terms of how much actual consumable stuff grows on the plant, right? So the plant could live, but if I want a bunch of peppers, I have to do it a certain way, right? I was naive. I guess it's probably obviously common sense to people who are in that space, but, you know, coming from like computers and cameras and that kind of thing to like dirt and waiting, you know, that's a real personal challenge. I'm not a patient person, you know, like if I want to get something done, I'll just sit down and crank it out until it's done. And, you know, with plants, you can't, it's when it's ready, that's when it happens. And there's no rushing it.
It's forced you to learn patience.
It slowed me down a lot, and there's been some commentary, like when I go up to my office is upstairs, and I go up and I'm just working, and, you know, sit there for hours, come down kind of like this, you know, like tight, and not just like distracted, 'cause my brain's in this different mode.
Yeah.
When I go into the shade house around the farm side, I'm cutting things down and planting things and digging and moving, and I'm told that I come into the house smiling and happy. So clearly something rewarding about it. I'm not conscious of it, but it's a gratifying kind of work.
It grounds you?
I guess, yeah, like literally. Just on the ground, touching living things, making them grow. It's cool.
How was that transition from moving from New York to Florida? Did you find that slowed you down some?
Yes. I mean, the timing was such that things were already kind of surreal at that period in time throughout the entire country. We moved in 2020.
Yep.
And where we lived in New York. So, you know, Jackie and I had lived together in Lower Manhattan. We lived and worked in the studio that we had. So it was like a big loft, and we lived in part of it. And then we eventually expanded and moved to a different location, lived in an apartment in a very busy kind of area in the middle of the city. And then so we had Max and Enzo, and then we realized we needed to have more space to continue having the number of children, you know? And so we moved up to Westchester and continued working in the city. And at that time, the city we moved was the first one to get locked down during COVID. So we were in this area that I guess there was a community within our area where the first cases of COVID had appeared, and they sent the National Guard, and they kind of discouraged everybody from leaving, and it was really weird. And I thought, you know, this isn't cool. And then, you know, I don't know. So that was a surreal period in time. And then, of course, there was the shutdown and everything else that happened after that. And
If you had guards saying, hey, think you need to get back upstairs? Or
I didn't see any, they were hosing down buildings. It was like, I don't know if it was just for media. I don't know why, but there were camera crews and people hosing off buildings and just like as if, I don't know, it was just surreal. I don't you remember the beginning of what it was like? It was just weird. And, I didn't have to go out. My computer worked. And I was just glued to the screen watching markets basically. And then this is crazy. It's chaos. And then, we had toyed with the idea of relocating. And I was pretty reluctant because of my daughter that's in New York. And, the fear that, like, what if we move? Like, I'll disappear from the face of the earth. I didn't know anything about Florida other than that I'd visit my mother-in-law. And, it was nice. It felt like vacation. But I didn't anticipate how I would be able to, live and work here. So, to your question, what was it like? It was wonderful, is what it was like.
Yeah.
It was like realizing, wait a minute, there are people with, I don't know if all of Florida is like this, but Martin County most certainly is a very wholesome place.
Yeah.
Where people are genuinely nice. Mm-hmm. If they're polite, it's because they are genuinely polite.
I know, it's weird.
They are genuinely considerate. They're generous. They're interested, and they have purpose. And their purpose is to be good people. It's like, wow, what? I think they're good people everywhere, but they're so caught up in all the stuff that they have to do just to get by.
Well, they're in the rat race.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way moving from San Diego out here.
Really, in San Diego, huh?
Oh, yeah. Everything's very fast-paced. People aren't really very neighborly out there. I lived there for 15 years. And coming out here, the first time when we moved out here, we drove across, country and pulled up in our street and started moving in. Didn't know anybody. And literally our neighbors are coming out of the woodwork. Hey, do you need help? Oh, you want a case of beer? Or wow. They brought over food. And it sucks because my first reaction was like, what do you want?
Yeah.
What are you trying to get out of me? And leave me alone. But then eventually, you start realizing oh, no, there are people like this that are actually genuinely nice, genuinely neighborly, and the problem is me. So you have to adapt, and then you're like, dude, this place is awesome. And I've adapted, and it's slowed life down as well, big time.
It's cool. The things that matter have really percolated up. I've really had a transformative experience in Florida. It's like everything about my outlook has I felt like just opened up. It's brighter. I've always been optimistic in general and sort of not risk averse when it comes to just trying stuff and going for it. But this is different. There's a certain purpose and optimism and kindness built in now. It's nice. I really like it. And
it changes the whole family too.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And, I sound like a sales pitch whenever I talk to anybody. Like, this is the greatest place. People are so cool. They're so nice. It's so much fun. That's another thing. It's fun. I was so, I don't know. I think everybody in New York is sort of worried about deviating from the right way. Not in a keep up with the Joneses kind of way, but if you're having too much fun, you must be dumb or something. It's weird. I can't really, it's sort of condescension built in, sort of arrogance, I guess. I don't know. That's the least way I feel about it. And
you have to work, you have to be working
it's
always.
all serious, and it better be cool enough. It better be good enough. It's like if you screw up, you're out. Whereas in I don't feel like people are worried about what they're saying because they're saying what's true, and they're not worried about what they're doing because they're having a good time and they're good-hearted. It's just like everything about it is nice. I don't know. Culturally, it's different, and it's nice. I like it a lot.
Your family like it a lot?
Oh, we love it. We love it.
See a big change in your kids, your wife?
Yeah, where we lived before was good. School was good. Friends were nice, but they're living a good life. They're outside a lot. They're comfortable talking to cool people. The people I meet, and that Jackie meets, the people we encounter, the other families we've met. I've met a lot of homeschool families because that's the sort of thing you do. when you're homeschooling, you reach out to other homeschool families, and there are various different groups where you can connect, because otherwise it's sort of I wouldn't say it's like a lonely proposition, but it's good to know what other people are doing and to have access to other families so that your kids can meet.
Yeah. So your kids, I mean, I think that was like a big concern for people, for homeschooling, is they are like, well, then my kids aren't going to have any social skills, and because you want them to be around different types of individuals, which I completely agree with. But you're saying, like, you end up meeting up with other families at homeschool, and then you link up your kids together, so they do have that social
and you have a certain awareness of who these people are. I mean, I can tell you that the friends I selected, we weren't great always, and my parents had no idea, what I was up to in school or around that time period. It was just sort of like they weren't there. They didn't. It's impossible. It's invisible.
Yeah.
And I don't fault them for it. It's just the way it is, and that's still the case in a lot of ways. So I'm painting it like a helicopter parenting picture, but that's not at all what it is. It's sort of like we can get a sense of what these people are like. If my kids are befriending people, I kind of know who their parents are. I know what their beliefs are like. I know what their values are like. I see how they interact. I see the level of respect they have for each other. And I say, okay, cool. That's congruent. It's, good person. Yeah. Happy to have my kids share time with these people. That's cool. So it's like it's a bonus, It's a bonus. I was really afraid about the social thing. I was always sort of like felt out of place as a kid. And I was really worried that my kids would not be able to integrate into groups and interact with the kids. And, I was really nervous about that. Turns out that's not the case. They're very social. So they go into a group of complete strangers, and they're at ease.
Do you have them in sports at all?
Yeah, they did some soccer, and, they're expressing some interest in martial arts now.
Nice.
I'm thinking maybe jiu-jitsu would be cool.
There you go.
I did taekwondo, and I'm not saying that that's the way they should go, but they seem interested in that because I had some experience there. But if I were to start from scratch from years ago, jiu-jitsu probably would be the way I'd go.
Yeah. I mean, I think you get your kid into any martial arts like karate, jiu-jitsu. It doesn't, at that point in their age when they're young, I think the first and foremost thing it's going to teach them is discipline, and that's, I think, what kids really need. But then, if you want a more practical martial art where they can use to defend themselves and be comfortable if they do get in a confrontation, jiu-jitsu is definitely one of the top 5, I believe.
Yeah, or jiu-jitsu, wrestling at a young age.
Sure. Yeah,
that's a good one.
Neutralize the threat or get away. You have 2 choices, right? If you can't get away.
or just build that confidence in them.
Yeah.
So they know, like, if something does happen, I don't have to be scared. I sort of know how to take care of myself and have that. And that's what I think is lacking in a lot of these kids is the self-confidence, and in adults too.
Right.
That, well, if something does happen, and you can see it on these, videos that are posted or whatever, like when there's an incident that happens and someone should jump in and do the right thing, nobody is. They're just filming it.
It's so weird.
It's because people are scared and they don't have the confidence to stand up and do the right thing because they're not properly trained.
Right. Or maybe they're afraid they're going to get railroaded by the system too.
Well, that too, as we can see going on with that Marine veteran in New York.
I mean, I don't know the whole story, but the media's already convicted the guy. That's the problem. Nobody knows.
It's the guy on the subway.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to believe he did the right thing.
He did do the right thing. I truly believe he did as well. But this is what happens when a city demonizes its police force and makes them out to be public enemy number one. And then the police are scared to do anything because they're going to get crucified, which I don't blame them with the way that they've been treated over the past couple of years. Crazy. So then now when you have citizens that are like, okay, I'm going to step in and do the right thing, and they're condemning them as well. It's
there's a very strange double standard that's happening. It's just I know everybody sees it.
Do they?
Yeah, and some people talk about it, and I don't think it can last much longer, honestly, because it's falling apart.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in
This is the process of it falling apart.
and I think it's definitely by design. And I keep coming to the question, like, why? Who benefits by the collapse of American values and society? It's also in Europe too, by the way. It's not just here.
Yeah.
It's like, who benefits? Who benefits and why? And I wonder, because I always, it's sort of like at an aerial, bombardment view of like what's going on, like why is this happening? Like, I mean, I know the nuts and bolts of like, because there are people have been elected and then they're sort of put into positions of power by people who have an interest, but why? I struggle with that.
Yeah.
I struggle
think a
with-
lot of people do.
It's like, because they must know that there's an expense and it's life. People are suffering as a result.
Yeah. And I do think, I'm stuck on that as well. Like, why? What is the purpose of this?
Yeah.
Of tearing away the fabric of what makes this country great? And you can sit there and spend hours thinking about it and trying to come up with a conclusion, but at the end of the day, I don't think we'll ever know like who is actually making these calls and who's sorting out this plan. But what you can do is take care of what you can control, which is your family, and making sure they're good to go, and also standing up and fighting for what you truly believe in and having a voice.
Right.
And I think that's what's going to keep our country the way that we were raised in it. You know what I mean? With the same values, or hopefully the same values that we were raised up with. So it just takes Americans to stand up and say something and do something.
I feel like there's a lot more people than would be apparent by looking at media sources are on the same page.
I believe so as well.
And it's just because of the control of those outlets and the dissemination of information is just pretty well handled by a very small number of individuals and organizations. So it's like, how do you find out? Well, you can only physically meet so many people in your time.
Yeah.
You can get that broadcast information hitting you all the time. So it's interesting. It's an interesting time to be looking at it from like how propaganda works. I mean, we're living in it.
I feel like a lot more patriots are putting media out there though.
Yes.
Are you on Twitter?
I used to do a little bit of what they call FinTwit. I would follow the financial people who have sort of opine on like how things are moving, but not much.
I'll tell you this: I've noticed huge difference in Twitter
Post Musk.
Musk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some. I don't know what his agenda is, but it's pretty interesting to see what a shakeup he creates wherever he goes. Huh?
I tell you what, though, I like pre Musk, you would just see, liberal posts that were like highly liked, and you're like looking at comments, and it's like all the liked ones are at the top, and then post Musk, it's like you get a true. It seems, I don't know, but it seems like you're getting a true representation on stuff, and then you're looking at like, and you're like, wait a minute, there's a lot more conservative stuff
Right.
out here. I mean, you still see both sides, but you're just, I feel like it's starting to be a true representation.
Yeah, that's cool. I have to revisit.
I have
pretty wild.
never been on Twitter.
Really?
No.
It's weird. I mean, all these apps are so different in the way they're set up. Twitter doesn't seem to be as actively engaged in trying to guide you as, say, Instagram. Instagram's, I use it only because I feel like it's a business necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fun venue. Sometimes it's fun. And I've oddly connected with cool people, which surprised me. I think that could be possible. My view going in, a few months ago and to now, very different about who's present because I've met some cool people. But that said, the app itself is absolutely designed to steer you in circles. And it's crazy. Like you push one thing and then you get one result. And then you push another thing, you think it's the same thing, and you get another result. From a user interface standpoint, it's designed to keep you there.
Yeah.
And while you're there, they're going to keep suggesting stuff and gauge how you respond to figure out whether they should amplify you or not. And it's there's no doubt that it's a curated messaging.
Well, yeah. All you got to do is watch The Social Dilemma. Have you seen that?
I'm aware of it. I didn't watch it through and through, but
you need to watch that.
those algorithms,
I mean,
how
that's
they guide it. Yeah.
pretty much explains exactly
Yeah.
what it does and how it manipulates and how it keeps you in that echo chamber. So yeah, I mean, I've never been on Twitter either. Like, so I don't know if that they do the same thing.
I think they did.
Yeah.
But you could filter it a little bit more easily. You know, you could restrict what you got and just say, okay, I'm only interested in hearing when this guy says something. It's usually useful. You know, I was using it like a utility, you know, but not for entertainment. You know, I think that, I mean, that's maybe giving myself a little bit too much credit. Maybe it was like partially entertaining, but mostly as a utility. And I don't know. I remember, I mean, it was clearly being censored at one point early on. In January, there was a lot of activity about stuff that was going on in Wuhan that would be considered conspiracy stuff now. Or, I mean, it was immediately considered after the fact, and then it was vanishing, like accounts, posts, stuff. And I was screen grabbing stuff and sending it to my dad who's overseas and, you know, telling him, you're going to get locked up. It's only a matter of time. And he's like, you're crazy. And like, lo and behold, Italy went first and then France. And then I was like, we're 2 weeks away. I was pretty sure we were going to get it too. And I told everybody, like, you're nuts. And then, okay. But that was all Twitter was like the window onto that. And it was only because I was looking at odd hours at non-well-known accounts and they were vanishing. Yeah. I was like, that's it. So it's weird. So those types of platforms, I don't know. Are we under the impression that it's now opened up with Musk? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I mean, I don't know.
I'll tell you what, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
For me, and I wasn't a huge Twitter user, but I was more Twitter than anything else.
Right.
Like, never had Instagram until we started this podcast.
Exactly, same sort of thing.
But like, when you go on Twitter now, I mean, you not only do you get trending results, but you can see them in different categories. You're able to. It seems so much more of just, hey, this is exactly the representation of like what you're looking for.
What it looks like right now.
Yeah, and I've seen proactive stuff that's like, hey, on both sides, where there'll be an article that's just zooming up. It won't be taken off like it used to, but it will give some context of it and saying, hey, we're not sure if this is true or not. Here's some context, but the post will stay there. The tweets will stay there.
Interesting. Yeah, it's that whole framework of, like, I don't remember what the set of regulations it covers, the liability of a news organization for publishing stuff versus, sort of these open forums. Like, it's interesting. Like, I don't know how I feel about any sort of editing or censorship. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not really in favor of it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just feel like people should be able to say whatever they want. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't force people to listen. That's where I draw the line. You can't force people to listen. But I feel like there's a...
No, it's your choice if you want to listen. I mean, that's how it is now. You can literally... And that's what I don't like any social media, really. And I'm on it. Yeah. I use it. But I truly believe it's going to be the downfall of our society, or part of it. I think if people are... Even, and I include myself in this category, where people look up to people on social media, or like the influencers, and I think that's pathetic. I think that if you're looking towards a person to look up to, that is a human being, and they're imperfect. Yeah. And the fact that people elevate these individuals, and they're like, oh, there is inspirational stuff that is put out, but at the end of the day, I'm like, these are human beings, just like you and me, that are selling something, and at the same time, the Instagram, Twitter is also run by human beings who are imperfect. So the fact that people are putting so much emphasis on social media and like, oh, did you see what this person said, or did you see this? It's like, dude, I mean, my own opinion, I'm like, I don't care. Right. I don't. That's their opinion, and I have my own. I can think for myself. I don't need to follow somebody. I don't need to listen to somebody to tell me what to think. I'll think on my own. And I think that's part of the problem, is this social media is just like with the regular media, it's causing people not to think on their own or do any critical thinking on their own. They're just going to follow who they think is the next big thing. and
right.
whether they're putting out the right or wrong information.
It's like a crutch.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't have to because so-and-so says they look cool, you know.
Yeah. And I think that it's
risky.
it's not a good thing.
It's risky.
Mm-hmm.
But there are, I mean, so I agree, but then there's good parts of it. Like Eddie was at a thing the other day, and after some kid that was going to commit suicide came up to him and said, hey, by listening to you.
That was on a podcast.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
so.
But I think podcasts fall into a different category. I think a podcast, you can't fake who you are, and you can't, I mean, you can try to, but on a long form podcast, on a conversation, if you come into it with an agenda and you're actually having that conversation with somebody for 3 hours, that agenda is going to be exposed at some point during that conversation if somebody's actually listening, right? And that's where I do think podcasts are, which is crazy, the beneficial platform to listen to if you want to get the truth out of something. You know what I mean? And besides listening to regular media where people go on there and they have 3 minutes to say what they want while also fighting the actual people interviewing them, trying to inflict their agenda and like, oh, no, only asking certain questions to get their points out. You know what I mean? So
shouting, Matt. It's horrible.
It's gross. And I mean, I went through it when I was going through my thing, and you'd go on Fox, and they had me on, and then they're like, which I was grateful for, to be able to put out the information that was happening to us. But at the same time, when you went on, they had an agenda as well, and they only ask you pointed questions because they have an agenda to fill to give to their audience. And so, therefore, you're not actually getting the whole truth. You're just getting what Fox wants to put out or what CNN wants to put out. And therefore, you're not getting the full all the facts, all the truth. And you're creating this echo chamber of people that just want to get the 1 minute clip and be like, okay, I've made my decision. You know what I mean?
I do. And it's funny to what you're just talking about, the agendas and things. Forget politics, forget anything like that. Even preceding the era of yelling hosts and big division between the parties and everything. Just going back even 15 years, I was shocked at how much of what you see on these sort of talk shows is sort of not scripted, but it's essentially very planned, and it's promotional content. It's not news. There's a PR person pitching this particular point of view, this particular agenda, whether it's a product or policy or whatever it is, and then they talk about it like as if they're having a conversation, and and it's like, wait a minute, that's not news. That didn't just happen to be a newsworthy thing. That was pushed. There was a deal made. There was, and I working in media a little bit, I saw that happening. I thought, wow, what else is like that? It just sort of made me feel like the peek behind the curtain a little bit. And it's pretty surprising, like how much of what you see everywhere isn't as it appears. I mean, from, everybody knows that like the swimsuit model isn't as perfect in real life, and all the way on to like the food in the photograph at the isn't as juicy. It's like there's always an agenda in big media. Oh, apologize for that. I thought I had silenced this.
Wow, what a ringtone.
That is.
I wanted it to be audible and unique. I had the old school telephone ring, but somebody else had that, and I have like a sort of Pavlovian sort of ring. My wife's like, why you freak out every time the phone rings? Like, because it's usually server related, and something happened, and so in this case it was not. But yeah, that's a good ring. If you've never heard it before, then it's working. Cuts through. Like, imagine a bunch of kids talking at the same time. That I can still hear it.
Well, 15 years ago or so, I feel like you could have a conversation with someone, and there would be respect between the two too, right. and you'd be able to listen to someone else that had a completely different view, and at least respect them. I think of us and our, like, I'll have just about whoever on. Right? They can have all sorts of different views. I'll listen. I'll challenge if I don't believe it. If I'll listen to their response.
Right.
Like, there'll be a respect there, and we'll want respect back, right? But be able to listen and have like, I don't feel like you can even have conversation. It's like me trying to tell you my point of view and get you to
Well, it's the ability to agree to disagree that's lost, right? You can have a completely different outlook on something than I do, and we can have a conversation about it, and at the end of the day, I don't dislike you, you don't dislike me, we just agree to disagree and move on. We all don't have to be on the same page about everything. And I think that's where people get lost, or like, well, you have to, XYZ, believe all these things in order to be in my group, and I'm like, well, then I guess I'm going to be part of your group. And I don't feel like I can stand up for my beliefs. Like I made this statement at the beginning of the podcast. I think the whole transgender thing is BS. And I know people are going to be, oh, I can't believe he said that. I don't care. That's my belief.
Right.
And I'm allowed to say that. Does that mean I hate you because you think differently? No, I don't hate you at all. I love everybody as human beings, but that does not mean I cannot say what I believe. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Eddie to get into my group for a while if he believed these things, but he won't do it.
Well, it's Dave's transgender group.
My kids have a lot to say about this. They think it's really funny. Like they think it's comical. They don't, they don't really have direct exposure to any, trans people or too much, mainstream stuff about it. But this whole "what do you identify as" thing, is they think it's funny. Like, what do you mean? What do you identify? I identify as a this or that, and they joke about it because they think just like you are what you are. It's okay.
Yeah.
How you present is up to you, but you are what you are.
Yeah.
Like
You're either a boy or a girl.
you are what you are. Like,
Yeah.
It's okay. It is what it is, and I don't know. It's just it could be that comical. I don't know why we're spending so much time worrying about it, because unless people are being actively persecuted for their beliefs, like,
But they are. That's the thing. It's happening.
what do you mean?
People are being persecuted for their beliefs. I mean,
People who believe that it's okay to just be what you are being persecuted. So, like somebody who's like, I don't believe in that, that trans should be a thing, or
you'll get canceled. That's a
Right.
way of being persecuted.
Right.
You'll get your business shut down. That's a way of being persecuted.
right.
That's been happening. You
That's
know what I mean?
crazy.
And that's where I believe that this whole, I don't care what you do as long as it doesn't affect me. Well, then now it is affecting me because I don't believe the same thing that you do. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think this whole, tolerance and all that gets mixed-mashed. It's like, okay, I want to be tolerant. I want to be live and let live. But the pendulum has swung so far now that the second I speak up for my own values and beliefs, I can get canceled. You can put something on, back to social media.
Right.
You can post something on social media that does not go along with the agenda, the societal agenda, and your account will get shut down because human beings are working in the background being like, nope, that we don't agree with, and therefore your business is shut down, your account, and that's how a lot of people make money too, is off social media. So those are different ways of being persecuted.
Wow.
And then now we have, in the military, we're, our foundation is supporting Lance Corporal Catherine Arnett, who was just thrown in prison, military prison, because she stood up and said, I don't want to take the vaccine for my religious beliefs, and they threw her away and tried to hide it. And so, I mean, these things are happening. It's just they don't get reported. They're not, the media is not going to report that.
Right.
So
It doesn't fit the inclusive. I mean, this whole idea of the words have been perverted, basically. They've been corrupted. Here, the inclusivity doesn't mean if you can't have an opinion that's different, then it's not inclusive, right?
Yeah.
If you can't be free to live by your standards, you're not really free. I hear the word fascism thrown around predominantly by the left, right? You hear that word, fascist, this and that, but that is fascism, like this orderly, forced belief system, and that's not freedom.
No.
That's not inclusivity. That's not equality. Equity is not taking from you to give to him. That's theft. There's a lot of stuff that just blows me away, and I don't know. What you're saying is kind of opening my eyes. I can't just have this sort of laissez-faire, like, I'm not doing it to anybody, so therefore I'm good. It's okay. I'll just pretend it's not happening. Maybe that's a cowardly outlook.
I don't think it's a cowardly outlook. I think that's like the outlook, and I had the same outlook. You know, I'm like, hey man, you live and let live. You want to be the way that you are, great. You know, that's the beauty of living in America.
Right.
But at the same time, when I start seeing those beliefs that I don't agree with infiltrating our school systems, and then, you know, they've already infiltrated the media. You can't turn on the TV now without, you know, seeing certain things that you don't agree with, which, you know, it's your choice. It's like, hey, then I just won't watch the TV. And that's what we do in our household.
Yeah.
But the fact that I can't send my kids to school without worrying about this agenda being pushed on them, and then, you know, that just goes on further to where these kids go to college, it's being shoved down their throat in college, and they're being brainwashed. I truly believe so. So therefore, you are affecting me. You're affecting my family, right? And that's where I draw the line. I'm like, well, then when is it too far? You know what I mean? And I think people do need to stand up and have a voice and speak out and be like, we do not agree with this. And when I say stand up and speak out, I'm not saying doing it in a violent or hateful way to be like, you know, I hate these people, they shouldn't be doing this. But it's like, you can stand up and say, I don't agree with this, and therefore I want certain things to change, you know, in my area, or, you know, and solve it yourself.
Right. Do you demand the same level of respect that everybody else is?
But I think people are scared to stand up and say those and even they're not even hateful things, but people are scared to stand up and say those things because they will get persecuted. They'll get canceled. They'll get fired. I mean, that also affects your livelihood as well. So
just by saying you don't agree.
Yes.
Not
yeah, that's
targeting.
That's just mind blowing. And I must live in a weird bubble because
we do live in a bubble here in Florida, and that's the thing. We really don't have to deal with too much of that. I've seen little trickle effects here and there, but you go travel, you know, across the country, and people, I mean, take California for example, right? Everyone, especially here, is like, oh, California, like they're completely liberal and this and that. They're not. There's major pockets of conservatives that live there that are having to keep their mouths shut because they'll get ruined if they speak up. Right.
Rough.
And that should not be happening in any state in this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like my kids don't even barely know but they don't know what COVID is at all. Like really, like they didn't have, it didn't affect them hardly at all. They didn't know. They said pandemic. What does that mean? like they grew up because they grew up through it here.
Right. It was different here for sure.
But I'll give an example of like where, because I'll genuinely take more towards your side where I'll go, okay, and I'll try and think through it intellectually. And I'll try and like, how come? Look from their perspective. I try and be like reasonable.
Empathy, you know, like why?
But then I take my kids to go see a Disney movie.
Ah, yes. This is a point of contention for me too.
And at this movie, right, there is a young boy, my kid's age, like under 10, and he's talking about being attracted to another boy. And the dad is talking about them being in a relationship together. I mean, in this isn't new stuff. Like it's been covert, right? Like you can see it being covert in other Disney movies before this.
Right.
The latest one, man, was overt. To the fact my kids are going, why is they talking about dating? They're both boys.
Right.
You know, and that's being pushed on my kid. I'm like, okay.
That's because they're trying to, that's the way they normalize it. They get kids, especially your kids' age, how young they are, to be like, oh, that's normal now. So that's how they grow up, thinking that's normal. But then and you might not agree with it, right?
I
You're
don't.
like, yeah, exactly. And that's your belief to not agree with that. And that's where I say you have to take control of what you can, which is your household. So then if Disney's going to sit there and try and manipulate kids by putting these hidden messages and cartoons and movies, then it's on you as a parent to be like, we are no longer going to watch Disney. We are done. Like
100%.
that's it. And that's where you have to vote with your dollar as well, right? If certain companies or certain corporations are pushing that agenda, then don't buy from them, right?
But it's hard to
It's hard. It's easier said than done.
Well, the deal is like I can't take that position of, well, this is where I land today, right? Like, and it's getting more and more where I'm like, okay, having to make lots of conscious decisions where I'm like, okay, well, we're not paying for the Disney app anymore. We're not paying for, like, I'm not going to give them any money. Like, I'm not, but also I'm going to say it on a podcast because probably other people agree with it. You know, it's like, what steps can I take to help, like, that agenda being, I'm one measly person, you know, but like if a lot of people did that, and it could be effective. I mean, that's how I see, and I mean, honestly think it's coming. That trend is starting to happen.
I mean, Bud Light's a perfect example, right? I mean, seriously, they put Dylan Mulvaney on the can, and what are they, down 21% or something like that? I mean, it's a lot more than that. I mean, that right there is what needs to happen. It's like, okay, you're going to push this agenda, we will no longer buy your product. And I truly believe that if they're going to take that stance, then yeah, people should sort of be like, okay, then I'm not going to buy Bud Light from now on.
It's interesting because there's the market doing its job, right? Like, we don't want this, we're not buying it, right? So it's like, you can't sell me something I don't want.
Yeah.
But now in politics, like, you can vote, but only so often, and then there's the whole deceptive thing that happens. Like, what you see is not what you get. A lot of the times with at least that's my impression of politicians. It's like, hey,
your impression is spot on.
And it's like, okay, so that sucks. So here we are again, and it's like a constant bait and switch. And for me, the scary stuff is that they're trying to legislate things that are completely at odds with common sense, in my views. I don't know how much of it's just the sources of information I'm following, but it just seems like things are getting pushed in a way that would have been completely unbelievable to, like, my grandparents. They would be like, what? What are you talking about? That doesn't happen. That's fiction. And now here we are,
Yep.
I mean, I know you don't think much about, how propaganda works, but it's legal for the U.S. to implement propaganda against its own citizens, and then since the Patriot Act, it's legal to arrest people and detain them under the pretenses of terror. So all they have to do is just adjust what that means, and they're constantly pushing it in that direction. So I don't know where this is going, and if it's just part of the way, society's cycle. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see. I feel like it's shaking out now, and it's like things grow at different paces. So these processes unfold over decades, maybe, and it feels like it's coming to a head. But it's really a slow ramp to boiling. You know what I mean? It's not like suddenly, like, you couldn't get to today without having yesterday first. The day, leads up to a point, right? So I don't know when it'll actually create a cataclysmic shift where people are like, enough, and everybody sort of, it's clear where the line is, and some on this side, some on that side, but it feels like it's kind of sifting out that way, little by little.
Yeah.
Regionally, in the media, everywhere, like, pockets of people who kind of agree on stuff, enough things to be like, okay, this is my place, this is how I feel. And I don't know how it ends, nobody does really, but
No.
it's pretty strange time. It's different than, I think it's a different kind of time than anything else in history because the communication model is so different, so immediate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, all these types of things used to happen in different ways, and, there are revolutions and changes of policy, all that stuff, but now it's amplified and immediate everywhere, so that's new. I mean, the whole acceleration of things is something that probably would have surprised, earlier generations a lot. I mean,
well, I don't think that human beings are meant to take in this amount of information and try and process it all at once on a daily basis. I truly don't think that, and I think that's part of the problem. There's so much information just being thrown at us, whether it's true or false, and we're sitting here trying to disseminate what is real and what is not. Yeah. And eventually that does take a toll, right? And I don't think we human beings have the bandwidth to take that on, but we are on a daily basis through this device, you
Right,
know,
we
our
choose it.
phones.
We pick it
Yeah,
up
we
and we
choose to
get that
take that
dopamine.
on.
It's crazy.
Yeah. You want to go into AI? Is that where you're heading with this?
That's another thing about Firecracker Farm.
Yeah.
That relates directly. I know my days as a viable developer are limited. And it becomes more and more apparent with each new introduction of a tool that facilitates more or less some aspect of things that I do. And I think the differentiating component is going to be, it's going to sound super woo-woo and hand-wavy, but I think that the differentiating element between tasks that a machine can do and orchestrate and tasks that a human being can do are going to be the ability to have empathy and to really get at the emotional content of why and what. You know, like you were talking about the rapport you have with people, why do you, that you care about the outcome for them, that you care about it, you know, what you're doing, the service you're rendering. A machine's never going to really care. They're going to have a scale against which they're going to perform and say, okay, I'm hitting the marker, but that will always be devoid of any sort of empathy or connection. Perhaps, maybe they'll be able to concoct an algorithm for what it is to love somebody and to care, you know, I don't know. But I know that the nuts and bolts part of programming and design and, you know, aesthetics, all that stuff can be kind of formulaic. And sooner or later, they'll create tools that'll make it very easy to execute on those things. And who knows what will happen after that. So I want practical skills that are actually viable. Like I want to know how to make things, physically make them, like grow food, you know, engage with people, you know, understand, you know, those types of things are important because I don't know how much longer the world we know is going to keep going. It's happened faster. I mean, I'm a sci-fi lover. I like these things. I've been exposed to computers since I was a kid. And, you know.
It's all fun and games until Skynet becomes self-aware.
It probably already, to some extent, it may already be. I mean, the types of research that take place that are not disclosed, like, would you give away your competitive advantage if, you know, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, this is some serious stuff. So I'm sure that there are tools and things that exist out there that are just fully capable of things that would be horrifying in terms of like the implications of what they mean for people who do like information work or, I mean, the minute they have a networked directing device with a weapon on it, I mean, who knows what's going to happen from there. It's probably going to go downhill quickly from there.
Yeah, I'm not
You don't want to comment
too
on that.
intelligent enough. I'm not intelligent enough to like, you know, delve into that and be like, what I think is going to happen. I just know when I see all these things like ChatGPT and all that, which everyone's like, oh, it's great. Like it does all this stuff for me and this and that. I just have a bad feeling in my gut that I'm like, I don't think this is right. Well, you know, I'm not that it's not right. I just don't have a good feeling about it. And maybe that's just me, but
don't have a good feeling about ChatGPT or the direction.
The direction it's headed, the way it's just, the way AI is headed and how like fast we are evolving in that sector.
It's like almost like just this year it went from AI. I mean, I looked into AI a lot when I was interested in markets because it was for pattern recognition. There are a lot of different tools and frameworks that exist for analyzing stuff and finding things that are not obvious. It's like, oh, these two things go together, and this is a result that happens, and that's usually, in the case of market, that's valuable. So, you know, those tools were cool to look at, and, you know, really interesting research. And you get all these different tools being built, and finally they're kind of stringing them all together, and they're doing stuff with language that's unreal. But the thing is, it's self-referential in the sense that ChatGPT sounds like ChatGPT, sounds like everything else. It sounds like ChatGPT. It's like feeding itself more of itself. And so it's getting more and more. It's going to sound like a foreign language. Like if I disappeared on some sort of Antarctic adventure for 5 years and came back, I bet you the language I come back to is going to be very different. And the beliefs and like the kind of messaging, it's like Idiocracy in the making. That's what I'm trying to get at. Have you ever seen that movie?
The documentary?
No, Idiocracy it's a comedy, but it's pretty scary. Well, yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. That went right over my head. Yeah. It was like way over. But you know what I mean? It's like it's we're getting there. And the more we rely on something else to, hey, Grammarly, I see these ads for this thing and make your emails sound more intelligent or whatever. It's like, okay, could be handy if you're in a rush. But the more you delegate thinking, just like what you're saying about the social media.
Look at the Hollywood or the writer's strike right now, right? They're all on strike. There's no shows being made. It's because these writers are, they're pissed because ChatGPT can literally, you don't need writers anymore. You're just like, hey, write me a movie about this, and ChatGPT will do it.
Right.
And so you're taking jobs away from all these people as well, and I think that's part of the reason they're on strike.
I don't think that's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because the profit motive is there, like why would I hire somebody when I could just?
Well, yeah, you're going to put people out of work.
It's weird. So yeah, that's something I'm thinking about. I don't know how long it'll take, but I think that the message for me is you better care about the people you interact with, and you better do your best, and to be of value and of service in a way that's not that genuinely of service. Because it's like, some of it. We can't delegate the real thinking, right? I think.
The vision, strategic thinking.
Yeah, the big picture, like, why does it matter to you? Mm-hmm. Like, why are you even doing a thing? Okay, because I want to do this. I don't think that'll be something that gets delegated to AI, but the nuts and bolts probably will.
Yeah.
And so it's like, better be a thinker and somebody who engages with people, right? Otherwise, better have some skills, real ones. Nobody wants to do the physical stuff anymore. It seems like that's what I'm hearing from people who are in trades and do real stuff. There's a demand for services, and there's a limited supply of young people who want to go in there and do a physical job, and to the point where it's pretty lucrative. Whereas in the past, it might not have been quite. You could have a good living doing certain types of trades and things, and do well, especially if you ran a company or something like that. Now it's crazy how, you could go do like a desk job. When I say desk, I'm doing information work of some kind, and do all right. But then you're at risk.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people still need pipes that work, electricity to flow, structures to be built, roads to be paved. This stuff takes skill. It's not just like you snap your fingers and there's a house, or or the electricity works. This skilled labor in trades is important. It's interesting. So something I think about too for the kids. It's like, do I want you to go and do liberal arts stuff and learn about what a French philosopher said about identity? No, probably not. That's probably not going to help you live in the world we're about to enter. You might sound cool, but to somebody somewhere.
Yeah, you want them to learn a trade.
A real series, maybe a few trades.
Yeah.
And find the one that's best suited for your way of thinking and you know what I mean? It's like, be of service. That's something. I wonder if I evaluate myself by the same criteria, I'm like, am I of service enough? I probably should try a little harder,
I don't know, man. I have a lot of thoughts around it. I find it fascinating. I find AI everything from the frameworks to the front side of the analytics side of what they're getting, right? So you think of ChatGPT, of what it's spitting out, but I'm thinking about, hey, what it's taking in. It's taking in real specific questions that I'm asking it to spit out. So now it's tagged me in some way or form.
It's learning you.
100%. That I think of the backside.
I didn't ever consider the input factors.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Like, how has Google gotten better and better and better, right? Because it's learned to be honest, I find it fascinating because a lot of it's psychology and tech, right, mixed together. And so it's learning behaviors, it's learning everything from times, right? Like when I leave here at 5-ish during the day, like my phone pops up and says, hey, you usually listen to this on your way home, because it knows that I'm about to head home and it knows what I tend to listen to, right? So it's taking in my behaviors, my patterns,
sure,
but it's also taking in at a macro level behaviors and patterns and geography, like where in the country you're from. You know, it's taking in all that stuff. So it's going to get better and better with machine learning, right?
And if you use Gmail, use Gmail as well?
I do.
So it knows everything you've bought that had a receipt sent to you.
Mm-hmm.
It read every email that you ever sent. I mean, I remember when I first signed up for Gmail, and this is like, I think 2005 or 6 when it first became available to everybody. And the user agreement was really not as long as it is now. And it was completely apparent that they were going to read, not they, no person would read.
Yeah.
That
It'd just be anonymized.
it would be read.
Yeah.
Same thing. Everything stuck in that spreadsheet. That was the impression I had reading this thing. I'm not a lawyer, but I read it and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
kind of, I sat on it for a day and I was like, fuck it.
100%.
And, it's like, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of good, though. I mean, one, I don't think you're stopping this train, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of implications for good, I think. Two, that you can use with it. Now, the stuff that the struggle that I have, really big, security, right? People, like, making sure people understand what it's taking in of theirs and that they agree to that, because there's a lot of users agree, like, you just check a box and then you click next.
Right.
But do they really understand what that app or that service is taking in?
Well, clearly most people don't. When they were surprised, remember the Facebook scandal? They're like, oh, they do what with your information? Like, what do you think they've been doing? Like, do you think they're just going to give it to you? Like,
Yeah.
of course they're selling you.
Yeah.
Like just the idea that people were surprised by that kind of made me realize the disconnect between somebody who's, if you're steeped in tech, you kind of, it's just part of the thing. You realize that's how it works. And then, but if you just were acquainted with tech through iPhones and just getting involved, and there's no reason to read that thing. It's just part of setting it up. You don't think about it. So it was sort of an eye opener for me to that, like, the big uproar that happened. Remember that? It's been a long time now, but there was an uproar about privacy and this and that, and then they enacted all these rules about data privacy and stuff. But could it be that the politicians really didn't know, or they just had to act surprised and indignant and like?
Just go read the Twitter files that Elon released.
They know stuff.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we could have a whole other podcast on that,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we probably should. I'm down, but
Should get somebody way more qualified than me to discuss it, though.
No, I like, everyday people and especially like how you think about things. Like, you have some doctor at MIT or something that comes in and explains a bunch of stuff. A lot of times they can't simplify it down to just layman's terms. Right. And understanding at high levels. But for our users' sake, how can they get a hold of some of your products? How can...
Oh, that's easy. Firecracker.farm. That's all you need to know. That's it.
What'd you say on the commercial? You said firecracker.farm. Don't bother me.
Oh, you were
next time go to...
I like that. That was my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I like that.
Yeah, firecracker.farms.
Yeah.
Yep, that's where you can...
singular, farm.
Yep. Sorry.
That's okay. But
And
if somebody types that in, I don't
on
know where they
Instagram,
Ultra Hot Peppers.
Ultra Hot Peppers, yeah.
Firecracker Farm on Instagram, I think, belongs to a horse farm in Colorado. So if you're getting requests for hot peppers, and just send them my way, please. And somebody did call me about a horse, and I sent them to you. So I'm not kidding. My phone rang, like, do you have any? I was like, what are you talking about? And then I realized, oh, wait a minute.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, so Firecracker Farm.
Yep.
And then Ultra Hot Peppers on Instagram is
Yeah.
where they can find you and get your product. And I can go ahead and vouch right now that you will not be disappointed. It is
Thank you.
Some of the best salt that are just seasoning that I've put on. I put it on everything. You can put it in drinks, coffee, steak, anything.
Turns out, folks are putting it in coffee.
Yep.
I hadn't even tried that. And like one of my friends was telling me, oh, you got to put it in your coffee. I was like, and then, some very official coffee folks decided to do that. And then it's like, okay, that's cool. That led to some interest. was
Yeah.
really cool.
That says a lot about the product, that it can be used on pretty much everything.
I always say, oh, everything's better with hot salt. And that's not just my pitch. I'm just saying everything's better with hot salt. Just don't get it on your fingers and then into your eyes.
Yeah.
It's really easy to make that mistake with hot pepper. Capsaicin's not water soluble. So just washing your hands is not going to need a lot of soap. Oily stuff will pull it.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of mishaps in testing. Dumb stuff. But yeah.
Awesome, brother. Well,
Awesome.
I appreciate you coming down here and being on. And, dude, it was a great conversation.
Thank you. I was scared.
I know we went on some tangents, but those are good tangents to go on. So, yeah.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Out.
Out.
Right on.
Sorry, man. I had to cut that short.
No, it's all good. That was all over the map. That was all over the map.
Yeah. No, that line.